Hi, this is going to be an interesting video. I am currently parked outside of a specialty machine shop because I had to get some bearings. This is going to be a really weird video about a typewriter.
Hello there. It's been over a year since I last did a video about this, my Xerox Memorywriter 645S. This is a typewriter that uses 5 1/4 inch floppy disks, or at least that's how I saw it when I first bought it. That's still true, of course, but it's so much more than that, and I've really learned to appreciate it as I've been working on it over the last several months, actually. Now, the last time we looked at this, I was held up by the fact that it needed an operating system disk, and, well, we now have them, thanks to John from CellGen Studios, and we can actually try booting it up with that. But we have something else too. The last time I made a video about this, I made an adapter cable to connect this to an MDA adapter, because what were the chances I was ever going to find the original display for one of these? Like I said in that video, somebody would have to list the original CRT while knowing what it goes to and not having the entire machine. I can't believe it, but it actually happened. This is the correct monitor for this machine, and it works. It came with the arm and everything. I just, like, stars aligned here, okay? I cannot believe this. So with the original operating system disk here, we can pop that in there, fire the machine up, and it's actually gonna work. Sort of. And there we are. It has booted, which is something I never really thought I would be able to say. However, there is still one thing really holding this thing back, and I don't know if there's going to be a solution for that or not, but there's been so much buildup to get to this point that I don't really want to spoil that yet for you. And I want you to see the adventure that I had to go on to even get this thing to this point, because nearly everything in this that could go wrong, with the exception of the power supply somehow, had issues. I've had to fix the floppy drives, the keyboard again, the motor for the carriage, the spool of ribbon itself, so many different things. So I want to take you back and go through some of the repairs that I've had to do to this thing to get it to this point, because it really is fascinating and I want to get it working so badly, and it will help you appreciate what the complexities with this thing are to go over all of that.
I've got about 15 hours of footage of everything I've done to get this machine into a working state, but I started recording in 2022. So we're just going to cover the big steps of this so you can see what has been involved in getting this thing going again. Starting back in June of 2022, I made my first video about this machine. It ended with me being excited about getting video out working, but I didn't have much hope that I could ever use it without software. But some amazing luck happened when John from the YouTube channel CellGen Studio reached out about being able to potentially send me system disks. That ended up working out, and after getting them, I was able to make flux images of them and get them uploaded to archive.org. This rocked because the machine is completely useless without these, and it was now possible to get it to do something. Using the disks was a little tricky though, because the memory writers use Shugart SA200 floppy drives, which have a rubber belt. This weakened over time and wouldn't reliably spin the disk anymore. To just test the machine, I was able to connect a standard PC 5 1/4 inch 40-track drive though. This isn't a perfect solution because the Xerox uses proper Shugart addressing, but just for this, it was fine. With the replacement drive, I was able to confirm that the disks worked and see the machine properly come to life for the first time. This was a great step, but it soon became apparent that this would be one of many. The keyboard was completely unresponsive. Not due to software though, because it turns out they use foam and foil switches, which are pretty much always bad now. And I still needed to fix the original floppy drives. There are other problems still, but I didn't know about those yet. First, I was focused on the keyboard. Around the time I was working with TechSelect on the quad flop I eventually reviewed, I mentioned I was working on the Memorywriter, and they were able to send me some pads for it to try out. The Memorywriter actually has a membrane that the pads are glued to rather than the typical method of clips holding onto a rigid disc. I had used TechSelect's foam pads before in my compact portable, so I knew they would work, but wasn't too sure about how well they would do in this. I used some B7000 glue to put these in, which will definitely hold, but should be left to cure for a while. While working on that, I also pulled out the floppy drives again to measure the belts to know what I would need to be looking for to order replacements. They are a slightly uncommon size, though, that I had trouble finding an exact match for, and ended up waiting to see what I could find with more searching before ordering. After that, I left the glue to set and kind of forgot about this project for a while. I got an itch to get back to this thing more recently and wanted to get it going again. I went to reassemble the keyboard and it didn't work quite right. After inspecting the pads on the PCB itself, I found that they were kind of cloudy and dirty, so I ended up cleaning the whole thing with isopropyl alcohol, which did make it work. Why, though, I don't really understand, because these keyboards detect presses capacitively, so that shouldn't matter, but whatever, it worked, so we'll just move on. Another problem popped up now that the keyboard was fixed. The Carriage would stall from jamming sometimes. So I figured I would try lubricating all the bearings to help with this. The setup for the Carriage is kind of convoluted, with the cable routed through a bunch of pullings and a spool on the stepper motor in the center. I started by lubricating the outer pulleys, which didn't do much. So I turned my attention to the stepper motor, thinking it could be like the bad floppy drive I'd repaired in video before. Getting the motor out without disassembling the whole thing is a challenge because of the short cable on it, but I was able to drop some oil into the bearings from the outsides, which did basically nothing. I decided to remove the rotor from the motor to get better access to the bearings. After getting it out, I could feel one of the ball bearings was just grinding and had likely flat spotted inside. So these were just bad and needed replaced. So no solving it that day. So I went to put it all back together and made just a complete mess of the spool for the Carriage cable, which took me a half an hour to figure out how to rewind. But after that, I looked at the floppy drives. I'd bought some random 4mm wide belt kits on Amazon and just hoped they would have something that would fit. With a little bit of a stretch, it seemed like they would do the job, and thankfully they did. So I now had the keyboard and the original floppy drives working. The last thing was just those motor bearings. I got distracted by some other projects again, and after a few weeks decided to try and wrap up the Memorywriter. I stopped by a skate shop on the way to the office one day and was able to grab some new bearings. I knew, though, that bearings can be a pain to work with, so I also went to another store and grabbed some new tools, including a clamp-on bench vise and a really weird plumbing tool that looked thin enough to act as a bearing puller with the thin space that I had to work with between the bearings and the magnets on the rotors. Shout out to Kaiser Soze, who pointed out that that thing existed because it ended up being perfect. After pulling the rotor out of the motor again, I was able to pop the bearings off with surprisingly little force. I'd even bought a propane torch in case I needed to expand them, but it just was not needed. The bad news, though, was that the new 608 bearings I'd picked up weren't the right size. The original bearings were the same outer diameter, but not the same inner diameter. I wasn't too surprised. I didn't remember what the number was on them before, and I didn't get a good shot of it the last time I filmed. Turned out they said it was a 627 instead of 608, so no big deal. I ordered some of those on Amazon. But to make a short story shorter, they didn't work either, because the full model number of 627N1Z was actually pretty important. It turned out the shaft of the rotor was exactly 1/4 inch, meaning the 22mm bearing was a hybrid imperial metric nightmare, and not easy to find. I ended up getting them from a local dedicated bearing supplier, and they had to order them from out of state for me. And when they finally got them in, I was able to drive over on a delightfully rainy day to pick them up, and I finally had the parts in hand to finish the Xerox. I got the bearings back to the office and immediately tore into the machine to get them installed. Getting them back on was a little trickier, but I was still able to do it without the torch. I started to put it back together and decided to knock out a couple of other problems I had noticed along the way. My one ribbon cartridge I had got tangled up inside somehow, so I had to slightly unspool it and then manually respool it. I also found the latch for the page end guide was too tight, preventing it from snapping in place. So I used a screwdriver and heat gun to bend it open a little more and was able to get the page guide down. I got it all fully reassembled, and after that, the carriage still jammed. Those bearings weren't it. I tried using a silicone grease on the slide rails for the carriage, even though I didn't think it needed it, and that didn't help either. So I started looking deeper and realized there were 2 pulleys with bearings on the carriage itself. I was able to drip some oil down into there, and it finally started to move more freely. After moving it more and applying more oil, I was able to turn it on, and the carriage was finally able to move on its own without jamming. Each step of the repair on the carriage had helped somewhat, but the pullings on the carriage itself did seem to be the worst. The motor bearings were definitely bad though, and while I may not have needed to change them, I don't mind that I did it at all. With that, this was the first time I could really actually use the machine after getting it fully repaired, but I wasn't really sure how to use it. I couldn't get it to show what I was typing on the screen and had no clue what all the weird shortcuts and membrane keys actually do. So I figured it was time to actually learn how to use it. Thankfully, I had the manual at this point, but I also realized no one had scanned it and I kind of wanted to just be able to search through it. So I figured I would just scan it myself and then read it from a PDF.
So now you're caught up with where I currently am with this project. I have the manual scanned and uploaded to archive.org, so on the off chance that anyone else has one of these, well, first off, email me, as you'll see in this video. You can go ahead and read through this thing as well, and you know what, actually, someone else may want to read through this as well, just to see if you can maybe find something that I missed, because at this point, I'm now stuck, and the manual has the answers for this. So this disk here is actually the options disk for the Xerox Memorywriter, and this allows you to manage floppy disks. It allows you to prepare them, recover files from them, and a couple of other things. I think you can copy disks with it as well. Now, the thing is that there are 2 kinds of disks for this. This, as I mentioned, is the options disk, while the base disk is the one that you would normally use in day-to-day work. When you boot up the base disk, according to the manual, you're usually presented with a blank screen and not much else. You have to put in another disk to enable disk memory. And this is something that I find very confusing, but the manual really states it over and over again. Disk memory is the feature that enables standard word processing, as in you can type characters and they appear on the screen. Without a disk, it can't do that. It has 128K of RAM in it, but it needs a disk to be able to enable word processing. Okay, fine. We have the disk configuration program open here, so I might as well pop in a disk and we'll go ahead and try this thing out, right? Well, there's a couple problems with this. This machine uses a custom floppy disk format. It is 16 sectors with a 1-sector interleave over 40 tracks of one side of one disk. Now, the data that's on them doesn't seem to be encrypted or stored in any weird format. It's just standard ASCII by the looks of it. I was able to decode the data on the boot disks to be able to see the text for the menus and things like that. Nothing too out of the ordinary there. So I should be able to just pop this into the prepare mode and have it format the disk, right? That would be a no. I'm always greeted with this. Problem disk in write drive. Now, you might think, oh, the floppy drive is bad, or maybe that weird belt you put on there spinning it at the wrong speed. Well, here's the thing. I can pretty much guarantee that it is not the drive, no matter what. The manual says that you have to put your boot disk in the left drive, but you can actually boot from either drive, and I can confirm that the right drive boots just fine. I even took that drive out of the machine, connected it to my test bench so that I could run the IMD disk alignment tool on it, and it passed that with flying colors. So the drive appears to be working correctly, and even not trusting that, I swapped the drives, and still it tells me this error. I have a sneaking suspicion what that error actually is. I don't think it can format disks. I think it can take existing disks that are already formatted and just delete the table of contents for the files, which means I would need one storage disk that I can blank out to be able to actually boot this thing, because the disk memory option will not allow it to work as a word processor, you know, its whole thing, without having a storage disk. And I can't make a storage disk. Now, I even tried taking one of the boot disks, finding the limited data that's in them, especially on this option disk, which actually doesn't have that much data in it. And if you look at the structure, you can see that it's mostly E5s. I blanked out everything with E5, and that still doesn't let it prepare disks for me. So I'm kind of out of ideas. I even tried to prepare an unblanked disk, just straight up putting one of my boot disks in there. And this is, again, how I know the drive is good. It tells me it won't format one of the boot disks. It just can't format a floppy. And it uses a totally custom format that I can't make for it, apparently. So, and this is absolutely eating me up inside, this machine is fully functional. I have the operating systems for it. However, I am missing media for it, which for some inane reason makes it completely unusable for its primary use case. Now, I don't want to be totally defeated here, and I don't want to end this video on essentially the same exact note as last time. So we're going to try out something that I actually haven't done yet, and that is type on this thing. Because now that we have the operating system disk, we can use it in printer mode, which allows you to just type directly onto the paper, even if the stupid word processor part won't actually capture any of the text. All right, we're gonna start from scratch here and boot the base system disk on this. Now you can put this in the drive before or after turning this on. These floppy drives actually have a separate micro switch attached to the latch on here so that the machine itself knows when you lock it in, and it uses that signal to tell when to start trying to boot. As it boots, we can see it's telling us to please wait, and there is a lever on the lower left side of the monitor for adjusting brightness, but this is pretty much all we're ever gonna see with this thing. Goes from please wait to saying that it's the version 6.0 of the boot disk, I believe there, but that's it. I can press a button on here to bring up the margin information, and I can probably set the left and right margins with this, but beyond that, there's not a lot that I can do because it will not allow me to type. Now, if I try to put an unformatted disk in here, it will detect it. It will try to load it up here, but then it'll say check disk in right drive. It's not going to do anything with it. Now, if I put the option disk in there, I'm pretty sure it will just boot it because it will boot from either drive, and it will reboot if it detects, I guess, an executable on the disk. So you could theoretically write custom software for this thing, but we don't need to do that. So there's no real point in doing that because we're just going to use this as it is. Now, very annoyingly, this is all I'm ever going to see on the CRT as I use it. It's just blank. That's so irritating considering how lucky I was to even get this thing. But for the moment, it has absolutely no utility here, so we're just gonna push it off to the side and not worry about it for the rest of this video, which is absolutely a crying shame. Now I want to get to typing on here, but before we do that, I want to take out the font wheel and show you that. This is the typing element that I will be using. It is a Courier Italic, which is unfortunate that it's italic and it's the only one I have right now. But if I get this thing working, these aren't that hard to find, so I can probably replace this later. But you can see that this is a 12-point font wheel and that it has metal contacts on the side that probably tell the machine that. Now, most typewriters with interchangeable typing elements will have some kind of font pitch indicator like this. And it's especially cool that it says PS right there because that means proportional spacing, which means this uses non-monospace font elements. But on word processors, this is especially important because the length of the lines is going to be different on your document depending on what size of font wheel you have in there. That's why the typing element disk itself needs to have those characters. The word processing software needs to know how many characters are going to fit on each line. So it's a cool little weird problem that had to be solved for something like this that realistically started out as, I actually think, a Diablo 360 printer, and then was just slowly morphed into some kind of computer typewriter hybrid monstrosity. But with our typing element in there, we can go ahead and attempt to print. So I'm gonna load in a sheet of paper here. And I'm not exactly sure if this thing has a fancy way of pulling the paper in, but we're just gonna do new lines here. Now, I'm not kidding when I say this. I really haven't actually typed anything on this yet, so I'm kind of really excited here. Let's see how this works. The ribbon is advancing. There we go. I'm gonna guess I need to get past that smudgy part. Perfect. All right. Yeah, I think I'm having some issues related to the force of the solenoid on there. So I'm gonna try and set it to be more forceful. So I should hold down one of the code keys and press Shift. The special entry light should turn on. Okay, there we go. Now I'm in special entry mode. That's very confusing. Okay, 3. That's much better. Yeah, so I was having some problems I was trying to diagnose. I was looking at the areas on the font wheel and things like that. I think it's just the ribbon is ancient, is the problem. So should probably order a new ribbon now that I know this thing has an actual shot at working. But with that done, now we can really properly type on it. Oh, that was my bad. I would use this opportunity to demonstrate the correction tape, but it is just super toast. It needs to be replaced as well. So we're just gonna move to a new line here and try that one more time. Oh yes, I am quite happy with that. Oh man, so it can work. Oh. Well, that was really interesting, actually. I tried to type much faster there. I can definitely outpace a wheel writer if I'm really focusing. This thing's a lot quicker. There's a lot more hardware in there too, so I'm not too shocked. But this thing, pretty good. Keyboard sucks compared to a wheel writer, though. I mean, that's basically a Model M, and this is Keytronics, so you know, it's not good. Well, I can't get it to work as a word processor, but that doesn't stop it from still being a whole lot of fun to use. I am so close, yet still so far away from getting this thing back to its former glory. It's all there, save for one blank floppy disk, which is just absolutely maddening. But maybe one day there will be one that shows up. Well, I hope you all enjoyed this video. Is there something on the lens? Just hold on one moment. Let me wipe that off there. Okay, there we go. Well, that's gonna have to wait for another day. Yeah, it's got PS2 type problems, but hopefully I can solve what's going on with this thing too. It's a little easier, I think, though. So hopefully that won't be too bad. But if you want to see more 80s word processor nightmares, you should definitely subscribe. If you want to help support the channel, you can find me on Patreon. But for now, that's it, and I will see you next time.